and welcome to the easternKicks podcast, a regular magazine programme about East Asian film led by me, Andrew Heskins, founder and grandmaster of easternKicks.com, and James Mudge, our leading writer.
Hey-o.
Each episode we'll be taking a look at the latest films, news and festivals, often chatting to filmmakers and stars along the way. Welcome to our latest show. This time we have the pleasure of chatting to director Mattie Do and her husband, screenwriter Christoper Larsen, about their film The Long Walk. But first, for those of you that haven't seen the film, and I think we could both highly recommend it, can't we, James?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Should we just very briefly try and set the scene?
Feel free, go ahead. Set the scene.
Okay, no, it's about an old man who takes a long walk. I think,
No, I mean, you're right. Joking aside, though, we are going to get into spoilers in the actual interview and stuff, but I think one of the real strengths of the film is that it's a plot which is incredibly simple, but which has a lot of other layers and stuff to it. So it is kind of like an old man, in an old hermit in Laos who he's living by himself, as hermits usually do. But, he can see ghosts, not in a sixth sense way, but genuinely just he can see ghosts. And he's kind of walking up and down this road, and it kind of walks in time travel to himself as a young boy, his relationship with his mother and kind of what that entails. And, yes, time travel, the supernatural, drama, a lot of different things going on in there.
ข่อยพาเจ้าไปเบิ่งอันหนึ่งจนเจ้าอยากมากับข่อยก็มาเอาเด้อตรงย่านบ่มีไม่เคยมาดอกนี่มันคักเด้เจ้าอยากให้เอาศพเจ้ามาฝังนี่บ่คือจะดีเด้
We're delighted to have director Mattie Do and her other half, screenwriter Christoper Larsen, on the show to chat about The Long Walk. Finally getting released in the UK and the US via Lightbulb Films and Yellow Veil Pictures, respectively. We'll get straight into it, as I know Mattie and Chris, we're cutting into your Giallo viewing time. But let's start with that most important question. What are we all drinking? Mattie, could you start us off?
Beer Lao, the heart of the Mekong. How about you guys?
James, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm drinking Famous Grouse, which is a bit embarrassing, but I'm not going to open the good whiskey in the afternoon, so it'll have to do. I'm in Scotland, so Famous Grouse is probably okay, but
not anywhere else.
No, probably not here either, to be fair. But I could have lied and opened like one of the fancy ones. But I've told the truth now. It's too late. So.
So I'm on a beer that a neighbour gave me quite a while back now. Actually, it's St Bernardus Abbot 12, which confusingly is 10%, not 12%. And if I get through that, I've got some Angostura rum, 1919.
Fancy
just to see me through the rest of the interview. That's how
I have Glenlivet. If it's going to go like that, I have Glenlivet, which is, I think it's nice. I don't know. The Scottish man has to tell me.
It's which Glenlivet is it? Is it a 10, 12 year or
12? I think 12.
And it's I'd say Glenlivet's an easy whiskey. It's not like a Lefroy, one of the sort of more challenging.
The peaty. It's the peaty.
I can't
the Speyside peat kind of.
Chris has a peaty one from Ireland.
A what?
A peaty whiskey, right?
Peaty. Oh yeah, I have a Carlisle.
Yeah, that's Scottish as well. But yeah.
Oh, it's Scottish. It's not Irish. Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh my god.
It's okay.
We don't have any whiskey in the house.
My husband is half Irish, and I didn't fucking know that.
Well, you can just read the bottle. I mean,
it's written in like one of those languages that doesn't make sense to me.
English.
Kalila is hardly.
No, it says right on the front Scottish.
Oh, excuse me. I haven't had any alcohol before this, you guys. I swear to God.
Fair enough.
Well, cheers to everyone on the
cheers.
podcast, and thanks again for being on this, guys.
Yes.
And shall we start? James, you want to come in with the start of the questions?
Okay, I guess one thing to say just at the start, I guess, is we are probably going to get into some spoilers, at least on the film, right? We're not going to, on the one hand,
assume that they watched it before they listened, right?
Yeah, I think so. Just because, it's it's a fantastic film, but it is. Otherwise, we're going to spend the whole thing saying, we can't say what happens. We can't say, we can't say this, or
or just edit an air horn in every time we.
We could do a spoiler version that people can download afterwards.
And the rest is just.
I think, just to start off, though, one of the cool things about the film is all the different genres or different aspects it covers, like time travel, sci-fi, horror, drama. Just wondering, what was kind of the starting point for thinking of the story and weaving all these different genres together? Because it must have been a very, fairly complicated process for writing it and planning it out in that way.
Well, it actually happened kind of by accident, right? So, it wasn't as complicated to put together as I think it would have been if we would have started out with that as a complete idea, right? Mm. So like in the first draft of the script, there's no time travel, which sounds crazy, right? Mm. And the original idea was that we were going to see this old man 3 times in his life or 4 times in his life, and he was going to have this ghost companion, and but the timelines didn't intersect at all. Yeah. And we plotted that out and kind of looked at all the different things. And, I remember there was one day we were sitting on the porch and we were talking about mom dying, which was originally the climax of the film, right? Mm. But not with the old man's intervention. It was just, you finally understood that, the kid had killed his mother to help her suffering. And I just remember, it was probably about 1 o'clock in the morning. We're sitting out on the porch and one of us was just but wouldn't it be crazy if the old man went back in time and helped himself euthanize his mother
to ease his pain, and he thought it was a better choice for the boy.
We laughed about that. And I think 12 Monkeys is my favorite movie of all time. I've always wanted to write a time travel movie. And suddenly, we just couldn't get that out of our heads.
I was think about how much it's going to piss off the art house people that this super authentic Lao village film involves time travel. And I was fine with that because I was as long as I get to go to a genre festival, I'm super happy, right?
But yeah, it was kind of interesting because the ideas came in a sequence that made sense. So it was okay, well, if this old man is going to go back and help himself kill his mother, then what kind of old man is this? And then we're well, what if he, then all of a sudden you're well, what if he turned out to be a serial killer?
And what if,
and then
he killed his own mother,
and then, well, okay, now this boy has seen his mother basically get euthanized,
and he feels guilty and responsible.
How does that affect him? So and again, all of this happened between the first and second drafts, right?
The first draft was not like that, you guys. The first draft almost felt I want to say almost like a docudrama, because initially I was I wanted to make a really mean satire of poverty porn, because Andrew's been to Udine before, and a lot of these Asian films sometimes are really sad and poverty porny, or really slow and mystic Asians that just don't do anything but stare at the wind or the ripples on a river or a bubbling stream,
Yeah.
And my films don't fall into that category. And there were a lot of people who weren't happy about that, because the expectation of a film from Southeast Asia is it needs to be this kind of super artsy poverty porn. And so the first draft was kind of like a poverty porn, but dark and really vicious. And as it changed, for me, it was really amazing because it became this study of grief and loss and regret. But at the same time, I was still making a film that was completely breaking the view and the perspective of what a Southeast Asian film should and could be. Do you know what I mean? So I still got my satire in there.
Nice.
But yeah, it was really weird putting it together. people will ask us, okay, well, like, you know, how did you put the time travel together? You know, and the dirty secret is it's just Back to the Future rules. You know, there's no DeLorean and there's no scientist, right? There's no Doc Brown, but you know, it's just Marty McFly goes back into the past, and when he comes back into the present, the time has changed, right? So like we didn't break the wheel in terms of time travel at all. It was like the only thing that's missing is there's no scientist in this old man's life to be like, don't talk to yourself, you know.
And he
grandfather paradox.
Yeah, no grandfather paradox, but he like seeks himself out actually, and I think that's really different for time travel, where he like actually seeking himself out to shake himself by the shoulders and tell himself what to do, and that's kind of different for time travel.
I mean, but it's just Back to the Future rules, you know. The ghost makes it a little muddy, but like
no, because she's a fucking DeLorean. It's not muddy at all.
She's the DeLorean.
She is the DeLorean.
She's kind of like John Locke's watch in Lost, the watch that just is kind of perpetually traveling through time loops.
Oh, I was thinking she was Penny, the wife of the Scottish man who was like, you know, be my constant or whatever.
No, the watch.
I don't remember the watch.
There was so much in Lost to try and remember all the different strands.
Yeah.
But I think
Mary Palin writing a time travel story.
but that's one of the really interesting things about the film as well, is because, you know, kind of Back to the Future aside, so many time travel films, like even just stuff, you know, like Tenet and whatnot recently, just trip over themselves desperately trying to explain everything and trying to cover every plot hole or every possible question people are going to ask. Whereas here, you know, it doesn't, like you said, there's no scientist, there's no sudden like big rationalization for why it's happened. So was that a conscious decision trying to avoid all that stuff? Like,
I'm a simple human being, James. I'm a really simple human being. You know, many of you guys have met me in real life. I would not deign to take on time traveling if it needed a fucking user manual. And I had a hard time with Tenet. Like, I think we had to go see it twice for me to like start piecing shit together in Tenet, because I was just like, I need all of these explains to just know what the hell is going on, and I still am not sure if I know what the hell is going on. But whereas the long walk, if you were in the situation as a long walk, you would know that you'd have to just discover it organically and figure out how it worked. And that's just how it would be, right? If you were a human who fell into the situation. And so I wanted everyone in the audience to go on the same kind of discovery as the old man. So yeah, maybe in the beginning, you're not sure what's going on. And the old man himself isn't completely sure what's going on. And then right when everyone thinks he starts to have a grasp on it is about the same time the old man starts to think he has a grasp on it. And it just goes so far off the rails that everybody's like, oh crap, we've gone too far. But this is how we would discover time travel in real life if there were time travel in real life.
Well, I think there's some fun too in that, like, we've taken a character that ultimately has such a little impact on the future because he's so isolated that, like, there's no he steps on a butterfly and goes back to the present and human beings are extinct. Like the stakes in his life are so small that it's like he goes back and changes something, and when he returns to the present, the cabinet's broken.
Yeah.
You know, everything is still kind of fundamentally the same until it isn't, right? And you know, I liked this idea of like, okay, here's a time travel story for a hermit that has very few human interactions, who can't seemingly mess up his past too much. And you know, that gives him confidence to actually screw it up way too much, right? So
he doesn't, it's almost like, how bad can it possibly be? Like his life is so insular, and all he's trying to do is just ease his pain because he has such a horrible memory of his mother dying, and he wants to have his mother nearby. You know, when she dies, after he goes and takes a moment to himself where his mother used to sell vegetables, right? He takes that moment because it is traumatic, and he just had to re-witness her passing again. He runs to that cemetery and he immediately calls like, Mom, are you here? Where are you? And in a way, it's like he is he really thinks it's that simple. He's just like a little boy again. He just wants something so small and basic, but he's pushed it so far out, even just because of the consequences of his action.
I like it's interesting that your vision of the future isn't massively different from what we have now. Yeah, no. I mean, just no money,
we're
no
children
cash.
of the 80s. Well, he's a child of the 70s.
Me too.
I was born in 81. I remember there was this arcade game. I don't remember the name, but the screen opens like the year is 2020 or something like that. And it's like a fucking space invasion game, like World War, whatever. And then Blade Runner, I think, takes place in like the year 2021 or something like this. And here we are, you guys. It's 2022. And I don't have a spaceship parked in my driveway. I have an inflatable flamingo pool, the same kind of pool I had when I was 4 years old. You know what I mean? And there are just so many things that haven't changed. But the things that have changed are really shocking. Like, look at us. We're having a video call right now. In 1980, that's something that I couldn't have imagined. And there was this episode in The Simpsons, I remember, where like Bart and Lisa are grown up and they have to remind their mother that they're on video call and that they can see her. And that was like our vision of the future. So yeah, we do have video call, but we're still driving cars that aren't that different from the cars that we drove 20 years ago. And the biggest thing that I wanted to point out is like as much advancement as we have in the future, there's certain shit that doesn't change. Like there's still going to be poor people. There's still going to be disease, you know, like we're in 2022 and cancer hasn't been cured yet. And cancer is not, or tuberculosis isn't cured in his world either. You're still going to have human suffering and the human condition, no matter how many chips you get implanted into your body.
Yeah. We took when we first got to Laos, we traveled around quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I remember, you know, one time we were on this like 14-hour drive that it was about 300 kilometers, but because the roads are so bad, it takes 14 hours of switchbacks through mountains. And I mean, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. It gets dark at night and you can see the Milky Way because there's no light pollution. And we stopped in this little wooden shack that was selling Cokes and bottles of petrol in like glass bottles. Like they went and filled up a bunch of glass bottles at a petrol station and then brought them back to fill up motorbikes. And it was all hard packed dirt floors and dogs running around everywhere and a kid on an iPhone 7.
Yeah.
You know,
it was iPhone 5 or iPhone 3 at the time.
Well, whatever iPhone, it doesn't matter. But like, you know, that's how technology spreads through this country. Yeah. You know, it's kind of interesting. Like, Laos, for example, never had the infrastructure to put landlines in houses, right? So they went from having no phones to having mobile phones. And the weird thing about that is that, like, I take for granted growing up in the 80s that when you have to share a phone that's tied to the wall with your entire family, you develop a series of like protocols and like courtesy, and you never know who you're going to talk to, and there's no caller ID. So, you know, you develop all these things and that are so commonplace you don't even think about them. And then you come to a place where they went from no phones to mobile phones with caller ID, specifically tied to like one human being, not shared. And they're missing that gap of like, which doesn't matter, but it's weird because there's this evolutionary jump.
Like, for instance, a lot of us who grew up with phones in our home, we knew that if it was dinner time and the phone was ringing in another room, we are not getting up off the table to go pick up the phone because it would disturb dinner and it would be rude, right? But because we didn't exactly have that in every home, of course, many homes had landlines now, but it was not always so common, especially in countrysides. Then all of a sudden, everyone had mobile phones, and they could be contacted on demand. And you'll see here people like during dinner just picking up the phone and talking at the dinner table, even if you have guests or relatives over. And that's just not a thing because they had skipped that gap in development of like developing this kind of phone culture or phone etiquette. And it's the same as computers. Like, we went from having like maybe a computer at certain places, like at an office or etc. And then everybody in America went onto laptops. So everyone had their own home laptop. People were taking laptops to school. And they just kind of skipped the laptop phase and just went straight to internet in your hand. You know, like everyone's phone has a world at their fingertips. So the way they search or use the internet is extremely different from someone who had learned to use the internet through like sitting at a desk with a laptop typing, because they have to be able to like search for instant information on a phone. That's what they're used to. You know, they just skip that step.
Yeah. So we tried to think about, okay, like this is 50 years in the future. What technology would absolutely make it out to the village, right? And it's like, oh, you've replaced cash with a payment system, right? And they even crack jokes about how the old man has this government issue chip.
That's our
which means that at some point the government came through every village and stuck a chip in people's arms.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were like
it was a human right.
You know, it's the same. You know, everybody in Laos has an ID card, but not everybody has plumbing or running water, right? So it's kind of like that. It was all, you know, take all these things and just move them in context.
Here's a better example, which I see now, and that is that everyone in Laos is using their phone to make payments now. It's they have a system called OnePay, and it's like QR codes everywhere. You can go to buy vegetables from a market lady, and she has like a little QR code printout on her stand, and everybody's just like beep, paying with the QR code. But hardly anyone has a card with a Visa or MasterCard. Like there are only, I think, 3 banks in Laos that provide a card with a Visa, MasterCard to buy shit online. And that was so shocking to me that like, they just kind of like, oh, we got this QR code payment. And they can't really buy anything online just like because a QR code has to be in, you know, here. And they don't have Visas and MasterCards. And I found that really weird because when we selected a bank, we specifically selected a bank that had a Visa logo so that we could like use our card internationally, right? But everyone here is satisfied. They're like, no, we have OnePay. We can just scan a QR code at the market lady. And that seems advanced. You know, it seems like Venmo advanced to me. We didn't know what Venmo was. When I went back to the U.S., oh my God, it was so embarrassing, you guys. When I went back to the U.S., I remember a homeless person, very similar to the long walk, homeless person asking me for money. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I don't have any cash. And then he was like, oh, you can Venmo me. And it was just like this like QR kind of payment as well. You can Venmo me. I was like, what the fuck is a Venmo?
I mean, one of the it kind of ties into something you've been saying kind of already a bit is, you know, reading a lot of the reviews for it, which are coming out at the moment and stuff. Like, I do find a lot of the mainstream reviews I'm reading for it do sort of focus a lot more on the concept of like, this is a spiritual film, this is a philosophical film, everything like that. And getting, I think sometimes as well, tagging a bit too much into, you know, exotic belief systems without actually saying if there are any in the film, rather than actually focusing on the genre elements of the film, which as a genre fan, you know, kind of jumps out to me more than anything. But I was just wondering, like when you were writing it, when you were shooting and planning it, like how much of was that kind of something you were thinking of, like balancing the sort of genre side of it against, I guess, that kind of more art house philosophy. I don't even like using the word spiritual, but you know what I mean, that kind of side of it. What was kind of the balance in the film?
You know, we didn't think about balancing that at all. And I think that the difference is like they're tapping into something that they're just not accustomed to. But that spiritual aspect that seems ultra exotic to them is really normal for us. It's really not like the beliefs that the old man has, even the black magic that he practices, even the Buddhism and the concept of cyclical time and reincarnation. That's not exotic to us. That's normal. Though these are things that we truly believe in and that are a part of our everyday lives. And so when people think that it's mind-blowing, it's kind of funny because it's like a large population in Asia practices Buddhism and believes this. We believe in actual karma. We believe in rebirth. And we believe in black magic as well as spirits. So I didn't mean for it to be like esoteric or spiritual in that way. Of course, I wanted to be extremely spiritual in the way that that's just how we traditionally are in Laos. I'm just portraying us the way we actually are in Laos. And I wanted the genre elements to be very front and forward because Chris and I just love genre films. We love the serial killer thriller aspect of it, the time travel science fiction aspect, and the ghosts. But it's difficult to do a genre film in Laos without things like ghosts, just because we really truly believe in it. It's accepted here. And so by no means am I trying to like exotify us, but I think other people do kind of exotify us just because they're not accustomed to it. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be really frank about what we actually practice and experience and believe in Laos. And if they want to imbue it with all of this, mystic Asian blossom thing, that's kind of their problem. I get a lot of comparisons to other Asian art house filmmakers, which I laugh. I laugh so hard about it because I don't like those films. I really don't. I find them boring.
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, we just really tried to like situate these characters in the context of their actual lives. Yes. Right. Mm-hmm. So you go out to the countryside here, people get a little more superstitious. You hear stories about cops calling in mediums to shamans to investigate crime scenes. Like these, it wasn't the intention to make it any more spiritual than how these characters' lives would be in the context, right? So, and that's kind of an interesting thing is that, the old man believes that there are ghosts very matter-of-factly.
He sees them.
He's kind of practically developed a system for maintaining relationships with people after they're dead, right? But because he's lonely, everything that he does is centered in something that he wants, right? Not some grand mystical understanding of the universe. He's gone through this empirical process of, if I put these women in the clearing, I can hang out with them later and eat a chicken drumstick.
Yeah, which he does.
Which I like because I'm lonely, right? Yeah. So like, I think one of the interesting things about being here that you notice is just how matter-of-fact people's belief in ghosts and spirits is, right? So,
and in fact, I want to be the anti-exoticism of how our culture gets portrayed. That's what I really dislike about some of the festival fare you see from Asia all the time, is that almost like at some point some directors realize that exoticism sells, and so that's what they do. And in a way, I feel like it's very inauthentically portraying the culture and the country. But it's because that's what white folk want, and so they give white folk what they want. And I'm not out there for that. I'm just out there to tell a story that makes sense to me and a story that has impact and meaning to me, because I realize that I've suffered loss, Chris has suffered loss, and there's going to be a lot of other people who can really tune into that and tap into that. And there are going to be lots of people who are curious about the supernatural or curious about the occult aspects, especially from another country. And if I show it on screen, then they can also experience it too. But I'm not trying to make this like, ooh, Asians. You guys work for easternKicks. I'm sure you experience it a lot.
yeah, for sure. It's just really interesting seeing that you can see a split between different kinds of reviewers, like put it that way, whether it is the mainstream ones, and to an extent, this was something else I was going to ask about. I mean, I don't see this film being kind of called like elevated horror or folk horror very much. It's not. I know. I'm trying not to laugh too much because I don't like the term elevated horror and stuff.
Horror because it's folksy that we believe in this stuff, right?
Well,
it's just not Anglo-Saxon and it's not Christian.
Yeah, exactly. Because folk horror and this whole, A24 elevated horror stuff, where you have like Hereditary, Midsommar, and whatever. And then you have this term coming in, elevated horror, which I'm not going to start ranting about this. But,
I'll start ranting. By God, I'll start.
It's the whole thing, for a lot of people justifying they like a horror film by saying it's smarter. But for this film, I've not seen anyone calling it elevated horror. Whereas if there is such a thing as elevated horror, as in something which is intelligent and which is plotted around stuff, then this should be called elevated horror more than some of the stuff which does. In that respect.
But that's the problem, is that horror has always been intelligent. Horror has always commented on society and the problems that we have in our lives. And if you go back and look at some of the really, really old genre films, they're extremely intelligent. I just think that people didn't give it a chance before. And now that they're seeing it, now they're noticing it, it's a little like, okay, welcome to the party. You're so late.
It's one of those classic things, I think, where both in horror and science fiction, they are really good places to talk about the issues that we have now, and put it in a sort of slightly, just a slightly distant way where people can go, hang on a minute, but that's actually happening. Yeah. And that's the great thing about both genres, and you've got both of them in Long Walk.
Well, what I love when Chris and I got into horror is like we are already horror fans. We already like genre stories. For myself, it was just, everyone's always in this like pursuit of the authentic, but we're not here to make documentaries, you guys. We're not documentarians. Neither should allow film be an anthropological study, excuse me. But at the same time, one of the things that I love about horror is it is definitely a vehicle that lets me tell impacting stories, personal stories and important stories, but I can have as much fun with it as I want. And I can actually exceed boundaries that, like, if you made a drama or if you made a documentary, there's this expectation that you have to portray authentically what people consider real. But no, like if I say, hey, there's a unicorn with wings, it's a genre film. Everyone's like, okay, yeah, there's a unicorn with wings. Like they just accept that. And I can do so much more and yet still make the points that I want to make and still tell the story I want to tell.
โอเป็นอย่างคอยเห็นเราคือกันเราอาจจะให้พวกเราสองคนมาพอกันมันเป็นอันนี้เดี๋ยวนี้มีหายสาบสูญไปบุกรู้จักว่าเราไปทางใดพวกเจ้ามาหาคอยเดี๋ยวนี้นี่พวกเราฮู้แล้วว่าเราตายเราเห็นลูกย่างไปกับผู้หญิงคนหนึ่งแต่พอเวลากับเจ้าเข้ามาใกล้แล้วผู้หญิงคนนั้นก็หายตัวไปแม่ต้องการซอกหาลูกของแม่
ข่อยอยู่หันตอนเราตาย
ข่อยก็อยู่หันตอนเราตายเมื่อ50 ปีก่อน
เท่านั้นว่าเจ้าตายมา50 ปีแล้วแต่ตอนข่อยพ่อเจ้ายังมีชีวิตอยู่นะเจ้าตายได้
So I mean kind of coming on from that I mean one of the things that we noticed from the bio that Chris wrote on IMDb, you talk about censorship in Laos, and wonder, and this kind of comes off the back of what you're talking about there. Is it a big thing in Laos, and is it an issue when you're making horror?
Less and less,
but it's always fun. I think that. I love the Department of Cinema here in Laos, the government censorship board, because there are very few people in it, and we have very few filmmakers in Laos, so we all know each other. And it's really comedic sometimes when they see me entering the grounds of their building, and they all look out the window and they're like, "Oh fuck, Maddie's here! Like, what movie is she going to do next? And what is she going to ask us to pass next?" You know what I mean? And it's actually kind of fun. In the beginning, this film did not get passed because they found it rather extreme and they didn't know how to take it. Do you know what I mean? And they were worried because, like, for instance, if they passed it and someone else on top was like, who the fuck put their stamp on this film? I wouldn't be the one to get in trouble, by the way, you guys. I'd just be out there like, hey, having popcorn, like meeting young fans or whatever. No, they would be, whoever put the stamp on my script that said, yes, this passes, here's your film permit, they would be the one who got in trouble. So there was a lot of reluctance on this film. And I spent 4 hours in their office trying to understand what they were scared of and where their reluctance was and discussing it with them so that they could understand that I wasn't trying to I wasn't being the bringer of chaos trying to topple society. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Laos censorship board is that it's really like 4 or 5 people that just really love movies, and a lot of them studied film overseas, right? A lot of them in the former Soviet Union, right? But they love movies, and they were learning to make movies and tell stories in the 80s and in the Soviet Union, right? And they've come back with this attitude of like when we approach the censorship board, it's not us versus the censorship board. It's more like us working with the censorship board to talk to the higher ups in the government, right? And the censorship board in Laos actually advocates for the filmmakers
a lot,
right? So like that's kind of an interesting thing, is that like we'll walk into the room, we'll be like, okay, there's this old man, he's been murdering old ladies. He cuts their fingers off and buries them in a clearing. At the end of the movie, he kills his own mother. Then he lights a house on fire and burns a boy alive. And
they're all like,
and the censorship people are like, okay, so here's how we're going to sell this to the government, right?
Or they'll ask me very directly, why do you feel the need to do this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, why? Like, justify it for us so we know how to explain it to them. You know what I mean? To the higher up that might like penalize us.
Yeah. So then we leave the room, and the Department of Cinema censorship board goes to the Ministry of Information and Culture, and they present the case for us making the movie, right? And typically, like, what happened with The Long Walk was they came back and they said, look, there's some things that are concerning, but make the movie however you want. Here are the shooting permits. You can't show it in Laos unless
we see the cut.
It plays in a major film festival.
Oh, wait, for this one they said that.
Right. So
first of all, they have to see the cut, but they also wanted to see the reaction
in the international community, right?
Because if everyone came out and was like, she's brought Laos down, she's pulled the covers off of Laos, and she, like, it became a super political film or something, which, like, I don't know anything about politics. Why would I make a political film? Then they would have been like, oh, hell no, this doesn't get shown in Laos. But then actually they became super proud of the film because, like, as you know, the film did well. And they were like, yeah, that's us. We passed that. We passed that.
But yeah, but the thing is it was like the so-called censorship people that negotiated that deal on our behalf. Right. And so when we went out to shoot, it was shoot the script, shoot it however you want, make the movie that you want to make, show it internationally, and then we'll judge the reaction internationally to see whether it shows in cinemas in Laos, which is like, it feels inside out from how you would expect censorship to work. Right. And then, they saw the overwhelmingly positive response. They were still hesitant about some of the violence and stuff, but in the end, the version that we show at film festivals is the exact same version that showed in the cinemas here in Laos.
I remember when we showed the final cut of the film to the censorship board, 4 of them came, and when the little boy and the house incident happened, one of the women left the room, and we had a window that she could see it through, and just paced. And then it wasn't until like,
we're like, oh no.
We're like, oh fuck, this is not going to pass again. Because, you get it passed for the permit to shoot, and then you get it passed again to show it, right? It was like, this is not going to pass. This is not going to fly. And she walked in and she was just like, and then to see her pull her notebook out and she was like jotting some shit down. I was like, oh, I'm so fucked. But I'm really happy because, like, once they passed this film, and then, like I said, the reception was good internationally. The reception was good at festivals, and critical review was good. It helps me as a filmmaker because then when I take another step, some of you who have been following my career from my first film to this film have seen that there have been, like, a lot of advancements in subject matter in what would normally make a country like Laos uncomfortable. And each film seems to push that. When they see the good reception, then I can push even a little more. Do you know what I mean? And every film becomes a little more bold, a little more brave, and we get to try new things. And it's a learning experience I would say for both of us, for the government and for myself, Yeah,
and it really helps that the company we work for also has a very good relationship with the government. And it's such a small community, there are 4 or 5 film directors. So, like, we're on a first name basis with everybody we work with.
I was on, like,
I think 8 years ago, it was a really different story, right?
Well, 8 years ago, nobody knew who the fuck I was. So, because I wasn't anyone. I wasn't a filmmaker 10 years ago or whatever. But I was on a discussion panel because they re-showed my film in Thailand again recently. They re-released it. And the Thais were amazed because of the censorship process that we could just, like, be on first name basis with all of these government people, because if you got a hard pass in Thailand or if you got a hard pass in China, you don't know who gave you that hard pass. You can't just go back there and have a meeting with them and discuss what perturbed them or what made them uncomfortable or what you should or shouldn't change. No, it'd just be like unanimous board, some invisible government body said, you can't make this film, you can't make this film. But in Laos, like I get my red rejection stamp and I walk in and it's like, hey, Detnikon, I see you've rejected my film. Let's talk. What is it? Too many bodies or what? You know? And then we'll like sit down and
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
And so how has the reception been to this film? Because it's been released now, hasn't it, now?
Let's see. We showed it in the cinemas about a year ago here. So
yeah. It did really good for ticket sales. And then also in Thailand, that was ultra surprising. Like in Thailand, it became kind of this like weird sleeper cult hit, which no one expected. In fact, my distributor had just planned on releasing it in like a couple tiny art house theaters in Bangkok. And then it just kept expanding and there was like more demand for it because a lot of people tapped into that cultural aspect, that the way I portrayed our lives, our religion, our traditions and culture. And they were just so surprised that like we took what is normal and turned it into science fiction. And when you think about it, the way we practice our religion, the things that we believe actually organically really work with science fiction or with time travel, right? It actually works really well. And so a lot of people were really surprised. They're like, how has anyone not done this before? You know what I mean? Because it worked so naturally. I will say that I think in Laos, it's a challenging film for a lot of people to watch because we are still very new to cinema. We've only had our theaters open for 5 years. And then most of the fare that we get is like super popcorn films. You know, they're getting like Venom or Gods of Egypt or whatever. And so they loved that film. That was like a box office trigger in Laos.
Throwback to 2016.
No, but I remember when Gods of Egypt came out. That was like broke the fucking box offices in Laos. Everybody was like, this is the most amazing film.
Fast and Furious.
Or Fast and the Furious, yeah. Fast and the Furious, like sells out, lines down the street. But Long Walk is not like those films. You know what I mean? And Long Walk requires an audience that is very patient and used to like finding the details and piecing the puzzle together on their own. And in Lao, when you're not used to watching those kinds of movies, you want the character to have this moment where they turn and say, the reality is we're having a car heist, but I'm going to tell you the twist is half of the team will be in that car heist. And while they're busy, we're going to be stealing these cars from this other convoy. And then everybody looks at the camera and goes, cool, look. You know what I mean? Like eyebrow lift or something like this. And my film doesn't have that hand holding. We don't take you through every moment of the film like a toddler, and we don't like show you this is what you need to pay attention to, and we don't explain it to you. But all the details are there and all the pieces are there. And I just want the audience to pick up those puzzle pieces themselves and connect it together themselves. And that's hard for the audience still. But the ones who knew that and the ones who could do that went and watched it like 2-3 times because they were like, oh my God, this just blew my mind. I finally understood what was happening. And then they were finding even new details and extra layers and complexities in the film. And so like, it was really interesting. This film ended up, for the fans, having multiple rewatches. I actually had a little Lao boy come up to me recently and was like, he said to me, sister, I watched your film 3 times. And I was like, awesome. Like, thanks. He's like, no, because the first time I didn't get it and I was frustrated. And, you know, a lot of people can read and speak Thai quite fluently. And he was like, and then I was seeing all these reviews in Thailand and all these like critics and bloggers talking about how fucking amazing the film was. And it was frustrating me because I couldn't see what they were seeing. And I didn't get it. And so I went back and watched the film again. And then all of a sudden it clicked together. I wasn't paying enough attention. I wasn't used to this kind of format of me having to do the work. the characters not having this exposition moment, right? Then he was like, and then when I saw that, I went back and watched it a third time, and it was glorious. He said, I was like, what the fuck? It was really amazing and flattering. Do you know what I mean?
Andy, why don't we just jump into a couple of like final general questions, because we've had about 45 minutes almost. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so just a couple of the kind of like the kind of the expected general questions about speaking obviously as like big horror fans and everything. Is there any particular horror films which you guys really love, or which are influences on your writing and directing?
You would have more influences than I would. I don't really have a lot of influences. Like I think everybody knows who's met me that I really loved Black Swan because it was a ballet horror film. And that's how you kind of use Black Swan as a template to learn how to make a film. But otherwise, like, it's hard for me to say that I'm inspired or influenced by certain films or other films, because before I became a filmmaker, I didn't watch a lot of films. I didn't know a lot of films. When I was little, I watched a lot of like super schlocky B horror with my dad, but I was way too young to remember any of it. Like way too young, and I was way too terrified because I was inappropriately young watching these films. You know what I mean? But I never grew up being like, this is a film that inspired me, or I'm making this just like this film. I'm just making what I see in my head and trying to get a gut feeling from the audience, and for them to have the same gut feeling that I want them to feel and that the characters are going through. So for me, I think I work on film on a much more instinctual level than on an inspired level. I guess you could say I'm not a very inspired human being.
For me, like, I love horror, and I watch more horror every year than I watch anything else. But all my favorite movies are sci-fi, which is strange, right? Like I love 12 Monkeys. I love Gattaca. I love, or they're Westerns. Like, I love Westerns, right? So none of my favorite movies are horror films, even though I think horror is the genre that I like the most, right? So, yeah, I don't know. It's really weird.
I think even more so.
I can't like specifically think of like 12 Monkeys. Definitely, like, I saw 12 Monkeys 4 times in the cinema on opening day. Like, I went at 10 o'clock in the morning and I walked out and was like, and went into the bathroom in the cinema and sat there for 30 minutes and then snuck into the next screening and then, just kept going back and back. And that movie just, like, I mean, that was what, 1996. I was 19 years old. I was 19 years old. Like that movie just, man, I love that movie. I don't know that I can think of a horror movie that I've been like, I want to see this 4 times in one day. Right. But there's a lot of sci-fi that I find really, really engaging. Maybe some of that came out a little bit in the long run.
I really loved Gattaca. I have to admit, you showed me Gattaca when we were married. You showed me Gattaca. I'd seen 12 Monkeys once, probably when it came out. I still don't know what it's about, because the only thing I can remember from the entire film was at the end, there's a library in Chicago that's covered in ice and snow, and a giraffe runs by.
Yes.
That's the only thing I remember from the entire film, is this giraffe running by in Chicago, like out in the open. But I have no idea what the story is about. I don't know what the film is, and he loves it. And I think it's better that I'm not inspired by any films, because then, like, I can tell you that there's a lot of films that I dislike. I really dislike films that feel like they're just imitations and regurgitations and copies of each other. And my entire goal in making film is doing something that really hasn't been done before, and making a film that needs to exist on its own. Otherwise, like, I hate to say it, I don't think I would make film. Like, what's the point? I always tell people this, like, if it's already been done before, it was probably done better than I could ever do it. So, like, why would I do that?
And yeah, are you guys working on anything new at the moment? Anything else coming up soon, or if it's been a few years since the
Yeah, I'm getting off this to go keep working on a draft of one of her next films.
Yeah, I'm working on 3 films, you guys.
Oh wow. Okay.
This poor motherfucker is chained to a keyboard. I only let him off to have like 1 glass of beer with you guys, and then I have to be like,
and then it's a send it back.
And be like 3 films, 3.
Nice.
So one is a thriller, one is a love story, and one is a creature feature.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, you could say monster.
Monster movie. There's alliteration in that. Monster movie.
Creature feature.
Yeah, it's a sex pet zombie, you guys. Fat old white guy who comes and like becomes a reanimated corpse in Laos.
Terrorizing the village.
Yeah, the terror was horrible already when he was a sex pet, and then like the terror is undying now. And it's nothing for real.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. too terrifying to be called anything other than fact.
Yeah. Oh, art imitates life, right? Yeah. Or life imitates art. Boom.
Thank you so much, guys. I mean, hopefully we'll get a chance to have a drink in person. I mean, that'd be fantastic.
I know, it's been so long.
And maybe some pastries.
The pastries, yes, the pastries. Oh, that's like the goal. I will continue to talk to them as long as when we see each other in person, there's hard drinking pastries.
But
you guys, I'm so happy to see you.
No, it's fantastic to meet you guys, or whatever the term is.
Yeah, because you guys have never seen Chris before, actually.
No,
because he's always just into the fucking computer writing in his scripts.
Because I'm the dog babysitter. One of us has to stay home and watch the dogs.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you guys.
บางคนเจ็บปวดหลายเขาก็สวยเข้าไปแบบบ่ทรมานเวลาเฮาเฒ่าถ้าว่ามีเด็กน้อยมาต้องการให้เฮาสวยเจ้าก็สอนเขาแบบนี้อันนี้แม่นวิธีสวยของเขาเจ้าเข้าใจบ่
So that was a great chat with the guys.
For sure.
I really enjoyed that. I mean, in terms of the film, I think one of the things I mean, there are lots of things to really like about it. I think it's, the way that they, as we kind of discussed, that they don't do any kind of exposition, that it doesn't try and spoon feed you the plot. I think it's really nice, but I think I love Mattie's work. I think, Dear Sister is a great film, and the way that they do deal with commentary in these films, and is fantastic. But I think this almost kind of feels like it's getting to another level again in the way that it's really, it is beautiful. It's kind of combination of, almost kind of, to somebody who doesn't really know these sort of films, they might see it as art house, but that it's kind of dealing with a genre, and it does take its time with telling this story, but then how it gets into the intricacies of the effects that this person has and what goes on. There's kind of classic kind of fable, almost kind of like fable kind of ways that these changes, he trying to change things doesn't work, doesn't help anyone, doesn't make anything any better. Again, we are in spoiler territory.
No, we are. No, we're deeply in spoiler territory. But from what she was saying in the interview as well, and one of the coolest things about the film is that we have this film which is and I fucking hate slow cinema, and I hate. For better or worse, I don't like any of that kind of like the other sort of whether it's the Simon Liang or some of the other like really artistic slow Asian cinema stuff, which I think some mainstream reviewers of cursed them are trying to lump this in with a bit. But I think this is a genre.
I mean, I have to say,
genre film.
I actually really like.
I know. I'm not speaking for.
I know.
Although weirdly, I like The Flowers of Shanghai, but nothing else. But but I think one of the great triumphs of this film is the fact that it is first and foremost, as she and Chris were saying, is a genre film. Like, and we have a film which is, you know, for me, this, I would call it like a patient build-up. I don't even like, I do use slow burn in my reviews a lot, but it's not a slow cinema, even though the pace is not, you know, which is fantastic.
Slow burn and slow cinema are two different things anyway.
Yeah, for sure. This is like discovery, you know, as they said, like, you know, playing out from the point of view of the old man when he discovers and stuff what's going on, which is great. And I, you know, seeing some of the other, as you said, like sort of lamestream media and stuff, which, sorry, I like that, man, but I don't know, and it's not, to me, no, it's kind of it's fair enough in a way because they're not often exposed to this kind of film. And if you're... I
think that's the issue, and it's kind of ironic because, you know, from their chat, that this kind of started as kind of as trying to expose...
Yeah, that was fascinating. You know, for sure.
You know, that kind of side of things, where we do know... you know, there are certain festivals I can think of, and I'm not going to name, but, you know, there are some festivals in particular where you know that at least half the festival is going to be made up of those films. Bless them.
Well, like Chinese Visual Festival.
You know, of those films that are...
Chinese Visual Festival was half that.
Oh, well, that's one of the worst ones.
Curses,
that are really,
curse his name,
really slow, really slow, and you think, it's in the middle of the afternoon, I'm going to fall asleep before the end.
But she's right. It's just a person... still from a more privileged background pointing a camera at, you know, poverty stuff for probably for good
about the whole
for good reasons. They're, you know, they've good intentions but it is
absolutely.
It is what it is. It's poverty,
and also interesting that, you know, as you said, there are a lot of filmmakers who have dug into that, and I personally find it actually quite tiresome because there are some really nice elements to these films, but actually you just know that both from the festival point of view, but even more so from the filmmaker point of view, they are really trying to go for that side of cinema.
Agreed.
You know, they are completely going for the festival circuit. It's not the, you know, in a kind of ironically in a moment, you know, it's not, those are not the sort of films that actually fare very well at home. It's all very well to go to a cinema and watch a slow film.
Yeah,
you can't watch a slow film like that at home. I mean, you can hardly watch in the cinema.
I can't watch in the cinema either, to be fair. But
it's you know that it all seems actually, and it really actually on that side of things. And I'm probably dwelling on it a bit too much and probably going into rant mode. But
rant.
It frustrates me because actually there's some really nice elements in these films, but it just comes drawn down to the stuff that you know is actually kind of really focusing on the audience they know is going to pick it up on the festival circuit, on that sort of critical kind of, you know, shall we say, white man,
backpack wearing,
European, Western, you know, they're going to really go for that kind of stuff, and it's actually, it does get a bit.
I don't know, man. It's one of those catch-22s, I guess, because without some of that, we're probably not going to attract some of the more mainstream or general audiences into these stuff. So we still. Do we need still a bit of that to get people in and they can discover? I don't know. There's no answer to that. I mean, it's the same as like saying Twilight was good for young horror fans because they started seeing vampire films and they got into proper horror as a result of being like 5 years old and watching Twilight. So if watching for some art...
that question, that's kind of like Pokemon and anime as well.
Yeah, exactly. Completely. Exactly, dude. Completely. It's the same thing. And is it a question where like... And as well, we're sitting here as like I don't think we're privileged. I think we're fucking cursed because we see every film because we, you know, if you're a discerning member of the public and or the critics or a fancier critic who's paid to do stuff like, you know, you can go, you know, and watch specific bits of stuff. Like we do see pretty much everything like that, both from, you know, from the writing and also just from because we're, you know, film. Fanatics or however you say it in a way that doesn't sound insulting, but we see so much more of this than the mainstream people ever would. So to an extent, like if you introduce some of these more, whether it's the slow cinema exotic elements or the more art house elements or these other ways, I mean, on the plus side, hopefully that gets people into it. I mean, the same way, you know, we touched on like elevated horror in that conversation, and you know, I will rant for hours about elevated horror and stuff, but at the end of the day, if it gets other people into watching horror stuff, finds more funding,
it is one of those things, and I think if that's
we can't be snobs about it.
No. I mean, as the often used joke, about us, we're like the hipsters that burnt our lips, and I've used it on the podcast before, and it is true. But I think you're right, and if people who are not necessarily into genres come to The Long Walk because they read some of those reviews, they're not going to be disappointed.
No,
but I think what's great about it, but I think what's really great about it is that it, in some ways, that's even more of an achievement that it can actually work on work for an audience like that might not necessarily come to sort of horror or sci-fi or whatever.
For sure.
Or an Asian, or even an Asian film in general. But for people like us, we can absolutely massively enjoy it. I mean, I would say it's definitely. I knew I would like it. But I'm still kind of surprised by how much I really liked it.
I wish I'd been able to see it in the cinema, to be honest. Because it's definitely one of my favourite films of the last year, and it's just slightly sad that I saw it on my laptop, arduously plugged into a big TV because I'm not technical and everything. It took a couple of troubled connections and everything, but I'm glad, but I wish I'd seen it because it's fantastically shot and everything as well, and it's a great. Yeah. I completely agree.
I think what Mattie and Chris do really well actually is and it, it's quite interesting to kind of hear them talk about the difference between the first draft and the second draft. They're very, and it is also, it is something about, I think, good writing is kind of bringing different elements into things and layering stuff. I mean, she from things like Dear Sister, she's really good. They are really good at the kind of commentary side of things. But this has that. This has all these kind of different layers of things that are going on without it feeling laboured. Without any part of it kind of getting in the way of any other part of the, we want to say it's horror, you see it's sci-fi, whatever. Nothing. I think I didn't say it on the interview, but I think what works really nicely about the sort of low key sci-fi is you're not taking out of it. We don't suddenly get into a very cheap Blade Runner kind of depiction of the future. It's all very kind of soft and kind of very low key, but that actually that does work.
Absolutely.
I think what's great about sci-fi is some of the best stories and some of the best sci-fi films are the ones that are just a really good idea and they don't actually need it's the concept rather than not so much the execution, but actually that this future is not that different. There's an idea here. It's children of men, or it's these kind of ideas where it's something that's not this massive production behind it. It's just the whole idea of it is that it's a good idea. It's just
completely agree with you, man. I completely agree with you, and the same for horror as well. Like we have sci-fi films and horror films, which are just like great B films and everything, but. I mean, not Event Horizon, that's an A film. But we have all these other ones, which are, as you say, which are just like a completely strong idea. And for this one as well, like, especially the fact with The Long Walk, the fact it doesn't... it's another film, you have stuff... Well, he's been referenced like 12 Monkeys and stuff. You can also talk about stuff like time crimes, everything like that. But I just love
Predestination.
Oh, man, exactly. And these ones are great, but they still get tied up in knots about stuff. Not even... I mean, they're still enjoyable films, but not Tenet. I mean...
Exposition,
But with this, I love the way The Long Walk just didn't fuck around with that. It just...
And it's the right decision not to get into it. And I mean, it would have made it something really quite wrong, I think. It would have just kind of blown the whole thing. And I think it does help the kind of the should we say the sort of slow burn pace of the film, but
exactly the slow burn. But no, and as they said, like it's still got the proper genre elements in there. It's like the question: does this make him a serial killer? We still have the gore thing. He's got the other girl like trapped in there, like some mad old rapey bastard or whatever.
I think what's really interesting about that is, and it reminds me of of this kind of thing of this kind of theory that you're a different person at different ages, but this kind of idea that he's become a different person, but because he's time traveling, that version of him doesn't realise that he's a completely different version every time.
Definitely, he's
which I think is a really interesting kind of idea in itself. That he's almost kind of like he's made himself, but he's actually created these different versions of him.
He's totally shocked. He's totally shocked by it and surprised. And then the characters he meets then are like, they think he's the other guy as well. Still, that's what's so fucking great, because they don't really then go into all this like pointless exposition and detail, how that might be, why that might be, what kind of like comic complications there would be. It just gets straight down to, it still sticks to this whole core of like central feelings about it and stuff, which is very refreshing for this kind of like sci-fi thing. And I love the fact that like marrying that with the supernatural in particular, because the Gong Tao, the kind of black magic elements in it are great as well. Like the way all this stuff fits together is it's good we saying this now afterwards, because we couldn't gush like this during the interview and everything. It would have been embarrassing, man. But it is definitely one of my favorite films of the last year. In that respect.
I'd say that as well. Actually, I have to say it's a pretty. Let's face it, it's been quite a low bar for the last couple of years. But I was just actually quite in a slow burn way, quite blown away by this film. And I think it really is. It does deserve a really wide audience. For sure.
And amongst, it's great. And if it does like attract in, people who are looking for the kind of exotic Zen angles and stuff, that's great. If it introduces them to something like this, fantastic. But also hopefully it won't put off horror fans who read some of those headlines, because this is a horror film, and it's got the gore in there. It's got some nasty moments. It's got some good frights. It's got the serial killers. It is a horror film. It's a
proper in concept. It's a proper sci-fi film as well. It's just done in a different way than you'll have seen before, which in itself is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so hopefully it will, and part of it comes down to however it's kind of marketed over here, as well as like the review headlines and stuff like that. But I hope this should reach horror fans properly as well. I hope they don't get sidelined slightly by some of like the more pontificating reviews, which kind of invites. And as they've said, clearly after this fantastic exclusive Eastern Kicks like interview, we can see that it's obviously not their intent. It's just the way some people like The Guardian, other people like might review. So sorry, something stuck in my throat. I don't know what I said, but no, absolutely, it's rare to see a film, I guess, which kind of actually manages to successfully kind of straddle that different thing, whether it's like the art house, the actual genre stuff, the horror. It's not an uncommercial film in any way, and I really do hope it'll reach a wider audience, especially from all the people listening to this fantastic podcast.
The Long Walk is available digitally in the UK via Lightbulb Films distribution and via Yellow Veil Pictures. Yellow Veil, that's quite appropriate for our Giallo conversation. Yellow Veil Pictures in the US.
Yeah.
So that's it for now. Don't forget you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe now and you'll never miss an episode. But for now, cheers.
Cheers.